Hey folks, David Stewart here, breaking out of the studio a little bit to give you a movie review. And what I'm going to review for you today is Despicable Me 3. I know that is not the typical movie that my audience would happen to watch, but I saw it, so I thought I'd go ahead and review it. Let me start off by saying that if you liked the other installments in this series, I think you were going to like this installment of Despicable Me. It has all the same elements that kids usually enjoy, and I think give a little bit of adult charm to the other movies. It still has minions in it. It still has like the whole villainy sort of thing. It still has the same animation style and the sort of Looney Tunes-like slapstick comedy. All that's still there, so if you like the other ones, I think this one will still be enjoyable for you. If you didn't like the other ones, I don't think you're going to like this one. Trey Parker is in it as the villain, but he is not going to automatically make the movie super funny if you're a fan of South Park. He's just a voice actor in it. He's effective, but he's just a voice actor. Now, let me go ahead and break down all the things I think about the movie. If I were to put it in comparison to those previous installments, I'd probably say it's maybe third best, or like on the same level as Minions. I think the first two movies are more effective. They have more effective stories, and they're funnier in a lot of senses. There's still a lot of gags. I think kids will still enjoy Despicable Me 3, but I think if you're an adult looking for maybe those extra elements that you enjoyed in the first two, they're going to be a little bit lighter than I think the expectations were. So production quality is good. It's the same production quality as the last couple entrances, a step up from the first movie, but it's very cartoonish in its style, which means you're not going to have a special attention to like the detail of the animation. This is not a Pixar movie. It doesn't try to be, but the production's good. The soundtrack I didn't like so much as far as the pop soundtrack. The score is effective, but it's just an average score. There was nothing in it that stood out, and nothing about it that was specifically memorable, but nothing that felt out of place either. So it's all kind of floating in the middle there. Let me go ahead and give you a little bit of brief analysis. I'll do setting, characters, plot, which is what I normally do. As far as the setting goes, it's the setting you're familiar with. It's a cartoonish world of slapstick in which supervillains try to steal things, and they compete with each other for who can steal the most outrageous thing and who can do the most villainous thing. The villains are not evil in the way that you would think that a real villain would be evil. They're not murderous so much as thieves, and that's like kind of a step down because this is a movie for kids. The thievery is what's played up and not kind of like murderous intent or something like that. And there is some murderous intent, but in all the movies it's kind of down below or kind of swept under the rug, so you don't have to deal with it head on. In this movie, they're trying to steal the world's largest diamond, and they're like, we'll be the richest supervillains in the world. It's like, but that's only if you can find someone to buy the diamond, right? Having a diamond doesn't mean anything if it doesn't convert into something else that you want. Anyway, that's my little digression. So it's the standard little setting there. That setting's inhabited by those villains, so we'll talk about characters a little bit. A whole cast of supervillains, and in this one you really have one kind of supervillain, and then Gru and his surprise brother Drew, and then you also have an anti-villain league, a league of agents that are trying to stop the villains from stealing everything. So Gru is the same as he was in the second movie where he left off. He doesn't have any kind of specific growth because he doesn't have any kind of specific challenges in this. He's sort of presented with an opportunity to go back to being a villain, and he doesn't even really entertain it. So we're missing that kind of conflict from him, which I think was a little bit of a missed opportunity. But he's still his normal self, kind of crotchety, cranky, the virtuous version of him that we saw at the end of Despicable Me 2. So I think it's mostly, if your expectations were to just see that character in another movie, that's what you're going to see. Kristen Wiig's character, who is playing his wife, her specific character challenge is learning how to be a mother to these adopted children that he has. He has these 3 adopted daughters from the first movie, and there is a little bit of growth there as she kind of learns to communicate and understand the oldest one, who's 12. And some sort of like awkward little, they have a little subplot with some sort of awkward teenage stuff involving like love and engagement and stuff in this foreign country called Fredonia. Now, added to the cast are 2 characters. One is Drew, which is Gru's twin brother, and Gru, his twin brother Drew, really replaces the minions in this movie as the element of incompetence. The minions were invented in the first movie to surround Gru with incompetence to make Gru more likable. And Drew sort of does this in this one. He wants to be a supervillain. He's his long-lost twin brother, raised by his father, who turns out to be like a famous supervillain. And he's really bad at it. So he wants Gru, who stole the moon and stuff, to sort of help him be a better supervillain. And that's sort of the big B story. The A story revolves around another character called Brat, or the Evil Brat, or Balthazar Brat, and played by Trey Parker, very, very effectively played by Trey Parker, whose voice, mannerisms, and delivery, I think, really make the character come alive. It's kind of like this hybrid of like Cartman and Trey Parker himself. And Trey Parker said he's like, I was playing if Kirk Cameron was evil, and you can kind of see that when you watch that character. So his A story is he's trying to steal the world's largest diamond, and the reason he's trying to steal it becomes apparent later in the movie is that he's going to use it to power a laser in this giant robot version of himself to destroy LA and basically send it off into space. Now, what makes this character interesting, and I think the reason he kind of steals the movie in a lot of senses, is that he's a child actor, and this is where the Kirk Cameron thing came in, I think, for Trey Parker's performance. He's a child actor who got his series canceled, and in the series he played a child supervillain called the Evil Brat. And the series was canceled as he entered puberty and lost his cuteness. And so he's spent, the last 30 years of his life trying to figure out how to have revenge on Hollywood. And the way he cooks up how to do it is to reenact an episode from his TV series in which he uses a laser to cut out Hollywood from the ground and uses these inflatable bubblegum things to send it off into space. So that's kind of his goal. And what makes the character interesting is that whole harmed childhood thing, the obsession with the character that you play, turning into the character that you play, which you could talk about, I guess, probably with a lot of actors, and I think that yields a cool extra dimension to what would normally be kind of a static and possibly boring character. The girls in it are themselves. You have essentially kind of a loss of the middle girl, and I'm trying to remember her name, where she just kind of acts as a foil to the youngest one who's obsessed with finding unicorns, and the oldest one who's trying to avoid being embarrassed by her new mom. So those are the characters. The real one that has growth has an interesting arc is the villain, and a little bit with Kristen Wiig's character, the wife of Gru. I don't remember the character's name right now, but there's a little bit of growth with her where she learns to she has a bonding experience with the oldest of the girls and kind of learns to deal with that aspect of it. Last part, let's talk about plot, and I'll try to keep this quick. I mentioned the A story. Balthazar Brat, the villain played by Trey Parker, is trying to steal his diamond and reenact his childhood. I think that was actually pretty interesting, and I found a lot of visual interest with the stuff surrounding the '80s character. I had kind of laughs. He kind of dresses up like Prince and like Devo and all these old '80s things, kind of all at once. He lives in a giant Rubik's cube. It's kind of to me, it's kind of funny because I lived in the 80s and all that sort of stuff, and I remember, there's a lot of little details. He sits in this chair that has all these weird squiggly patterns on it, and if you're from the 80s, you remember these, from Saved by the Bell, they had these, things flying across the screen that I don't really know what they were there for, but they were there. Anyway, so that's the A story. The B story revolves around Gru finds his long lost brother Drew, who's an incompetent villain, and he convinces Drew that he's going to use his father's villain mobile, and they're going to go steal this diamond from Balthazar Brat, and he's like, we'll be the richest supervillains ever. Then he gets back, and there's no real conflict over this. By the way, in the beginning of the movie, as the sort of inciting incident, Gru and his wife are fired from the Anti-Villain League for failing to capture Balthazar Brat yet again as he tries to steal the world's largest diamond, and then successfully does so a little bit later in the plot. So that's the inciting incident for the entire movie, both the A and the B stories. And the B stories, part of the B story is Gru's trying to get back into the Anti-Villain League and stop that, so he has this kind of sidetrack with his brother, and his brother gets very upset when Gru does not want to return does not want to hold the diamond as a villain, but wants to return it so that he can get his job back as a fighter of villains. Meanwhile, there's a bunch of little subplots. So those are the two big plots. and there's a bunch of little subplots, none of which kind of are really well developed. They're all just sort of individual scenes and gags, and some of them work and some of them don't. I think in general, because of the limitations of the movie, we feel just kind of like they don't do anything. One of the subplots involves the youngest girl trying to find a unicorn and having to be let down that there's no such thing as unicorns. Another one is the oldest girl accidentally gets engaged to like some villager in this weird country they go to where Gru's brother lives, called Fredonia, and it's by like taking a piece of cheese off a plate, and it's resolved very quickly in one scene, so we kind of feel like the conflict didn't really go anywhere for that either. And then you also have this C story of the mother, played by Kristen Wiig. I don't remember the character's name, I'm really sorry. Trying to figure out how to be a mother, and that kind of sort of resolves through some of these other little subplots. And then lastly, you have a little Minions subplot. Every so often they cut to a scene of the Minions. The Minions walk out on Gru early in the movie because Gru refuses to be an evil villain, and they serve evil villains, which is established in the other movies. They accidentally get arrested and end up in prison, and they just mostly provide a bunch of slapstick relief. Their scenes make no sense and are probably not intended to make any sense. They show up accidentally on like a singing show and create this like crazy coordinated number. They end up in like a state prison, and they end up running the state prison, and then they end up escaping from the prison on like some kind of giant balloon device they build. It's all there just to provide like immediate sort of visceral, childish, in some cases literally toilet humor. They're flying away from the prison on toilets, and there's still a prisoner sitting on one of the toilets, and so that doesn't really go anywhere, and it because it doesn't really have anything to do with the plot. They're mostly just like temporary gags, and a lot of them fall kind of flat. So I think it's because of all these little subplots that I would say that compared to the other movies, this one falls a little bit short, even though the villain is like so much more interesting than I think in the other movies. I think he's the most interesting and most fun villain to watch so far in them. It ends up bringing all those little subplots that kind of just peter out and don't really do anything. I think that kind of brings the whole level of the movie down a little bit. And the other thing is we have no growth from Gru, the main character, even though we have some really good opportunities for him to grow where he could be really tempted by villainy again with his brother, and that just kind of peters out. So that's what I really think about the movie. Thank you for spending a few minutes listening to me talk about it. Like I said, if you didn't like the other Despicable Me movies, you're probably not going to like this one. And if you like those, you're probably going to like this one. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. I really, really appreciate it. You can get my new book, The Water of Awakening. Links are down below. It's only 99 cents on ebook. I will have more giveaways going, so make sure you join my email list, and I'll have a link down below for give you a free gift just for joining my email list. It'll probably be in the comments and down below in the show notes. So you guys have a great day, and I hope to see you next time. Leave me your comments down below. Let me know what you think about it, or what you think about the franchise in general, whether you like it or don't like it. I think it's a hit with kids, and that's kind of why I saw it for kids. So you guys have a great one.